going to get rid of my library here. Shouldn't need the navigator panel. Shrink this up a little bit there. And then I'm going to add another editor. So for now, I think we can also get rid of our inspector panel. Just go full screen here. It'll make it a little bit easier for everybody to see. And so on the second editor to the right, we want to bring up the view controller. So I'm just going to go to the folder and choose view controller Swift. And then we have our storyboard over here on the left-hand side. Oops. All right, so we need to do some outlets for our different controls. So I'm going to take the Democrat switch, hold down the control key, and let's create an outlet. And we're going to name this outlet switch dem. So our type is UI switch, and click connect. Do the same thing for the Republican. This one will be called switch rep, capitalizing the R. And then we'll do our switch other. And as you probably already guessed, we want a switch Senate. And a switch House. I'm going to create an outlet for our text field. And we'll call this one txt state, capitalizing the S. And then the little label we created to show the number of matches. Need an outlet for that. And this one I'll just call LBL matches. And then finally, our huge text view that's going to show all the results. And this one was called TV for text view. TV results, capital R. We'll come back and create our IB actions here in a minute. What I want to do now is start to set up the data. So we're going to add a custom class to our app that will contain our data. So I'm going to go to the, I'm going to bring up the navigator panel. I'm going to go to the folder for my project. The second one down from the top, the little folder. I'm going to right click on that and choose new file. We're going to go to Swift file. Let's go next. And we're going to call this Congress. In essence, what we get is a blank program or blank file. It does import Foundation by default. We're going to create a new class. So we're going to type in class, and I'm going to call this class the same thing I called my text file, or my file in this case, is going to be Congress. So Congress will be the name of our class. And I'm going to put in the curly brackets. We're going to create a comment. One thing I did notice, if you put a space after the first asterisk, that does help. I'm just going to put in a few asterisks at the beginning and then type in class variables. Spaces, a few more asterisks. So there's the first header. I'm going to give myself a couple blank lines, and then I'm simply going to copy that, paste again, and I'm going to change class variables here to initializers. Initializers would be our constructors from other languages, and this one would be class variable or class methods. So there's the structure. What you might want to do is just copy all that and paste it into a Word document and save it somewhere. And then hopefully if you copy and paste back in, it'll all look good. So for our class variables, we want to set up the data. And I'm going to show you the data in Excel. So I gave you that Excel file. If you want to open up Excel, you can see the data there. This was a file that I downloaded off the internet and then made it into an, I think it might have been a comma separated value that's brought into Excel. It's got more data than what we want here because we've got the house, the first name, the middle name, the last name, the suffix, the state and district. We're going to pull just the state, not worry about the district. We're not going to worry about the BioGuide ID, and then the party. So really the only data I want out of this is going to be the house, the first name, the last name, part of the state and district, and part of the party. So if you want to take notes, you paper and pencil. So we want house, we want first name, last name, state, and party. Those will be the 5 items of our class as far as the data. So I'm going to go back into Xcode. And we'll create those variables. So first one's going to be house. This is going to be either an S or an R based on, are they Senate or are they representative? So that's going to be a string value. Let's do state. That's also going to be a string value. Party. Last name, I'm going to capitalize the N using camel casing. A colon. And then finally, we want first name, also capitalizing the N of first name. So we're going to create an initializer. So we use init. And then in parentheses, I want to pull in these 5 different data items and assign them to the data items in the instance. So we're going to pass in the house, the state, the party, the last name, the first name. I like to use different variables for these than what I have up here. I think it just makes a little more sense, a little less confusing. So I'm just going to use H for house. I keep these pretty simple. And this is going to be a string, comma, and then we'll use ST for state. That's a string. Capital S. I'll just use P for party. LN for last name. And FN for first name. Need my set of curly brackets. And then we're simply going to say, now you can do self.house. Self refers to the instance itself. So a lot of programmers will use self. Oops. This should be string, not first name. And it's going to equal H. You can also just use the variable name without self. So we can say state equals st, party equals p. Last name equals ln. And as you probably already guessed, first name.
Should that state equal st?
Oh, thank you. In that case, state would have equaled nothing. To be consistent, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the self there.
What drives the need for the self dot when you're doing?
So the self is going to be used more in the class methods. Self simply refers to the instance, a particular instance of this class. When we're creating the initializer, it knows we're working on a new instance. So it's really kind of optional there. I think in the class method, you can get away without using it as well. Like I said, a lot of programmers just use it for clarification. That's referring to an instance. And you can mix and match. So I had self and then not self. Like I said, all these is self dot or not use self. Okay, we're going to do a couple of functions here. So one function I want is to be able to return the last name. And then we'll use that actually in our other function that's going to create our string to display the information in our LBL results or our TV results text view. So our function here is going to be get full name. It's not going to take any parameters, so a set of empty parentheses, and it's going to return a string. So then I need my set of curly brackets. Any questions on naming a function and specifying return data type or parameter list?
Can you return an array?
You can. Yes, you can return a dictionary. So pretty much any data type you can return. In fact, we can create another class that would return a Congress, an instance of Congress. So we can create our own data types and return those. We can also create our own data types and have those as part of the parameter list. And this is where object-oriented programming really starts to take off, in that we can have classes utilizing other classes. We're going to keep it real simple, though. We're going to have one class. Okay, so what we want to return here, and of course, since we're returning a string, we have to return a string. So what we're going to return is I'm going to return a string, and we're just going to interpolate the, let's use self here, just so you can see how that would be done. Self dot last name. Oops, I don't want to capitalize the L. And I'm going to do a comma, because I want last name, comma, space, first name. So space after the comma. And then we'll do self dot first name. Very simple function. Just want to see how show you how functions can work within a class. So for an instance, we can call that class method for that instance from our main program or from another class. Actually, our main program is another class. Now this becomes the trickier one, and that is we want to create a string to print our 5 data items in our columns for our TV results. So one thing I want to do is I want to make sure that house is uppercased. Just in case we had somebody put in data and they didn't do an uppercase, we want to keep it consistent. I'm going to do the same thing on state. And the same thing for party. So anytime if we put in a small s, it's going to capitalize it for us in our data. Just make everything consistent. Okay, I'm going to call this one show listing. And again, it's not going to have any parameters, so set up empty parentheses. And it's going to return another string. Oops. And just one line of code here, return. And again, we'll use a literal string. I want to start with the space. And the reason I'm going to start with the space, let me go back to my storyboard for a minute here. Notice we have S, comma, H. And these are, we used a monospace font. So that first column really is 3 characters. It's either going to be an R or an S. So I'm going to put it basically underneath the slash there. And then we'll do a little bit of spacing. The state's going to be 2 letters. We'll want it probably to occur under the A and T. So we'll probably have 4 spaces before we get to state. And then party, we'll have a space, 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 probably underneath the R. So again, probably 4 spaces, and then the party. And then we'll do 3 spaces in the name. So we're going to hard code those spaces in so we get some nice columns. The Senate or the basically the House value is always going to be 1 letter, either R or S. The state's always going to be 2 letters. The party's always going to be 1. So that makes it real simple. Okay, so let's go back to our Congress Swift file. So I'm going to do a space. I'm going to do a interpolation of self.house. And actually, if you want, let's try not doing self on this one. We'll show you that this works. So I'm just going to do house. I then want, what do we say? I think 3 spaces, 4 spaces. Let's do 3. We might have to come back and modify these a little bit. We'll interpolate again, and this time we are just going to do state. 4 spaces. We'll interpolate party. 4 spaces. And here we're going to interpolate get, capital G, get full name. And since that is a method, I need a set of parentheses after that, and then a closing paren for the interpolation. Let's stretch this out a little bit. Like I said, I have to come back and do a little bit of changes as far as the spacing. All right, that should be our class. Okay, let's go back to our storyboard. And again, I'm going to hide the navigator panel, give myself a little more room here. We're going to create an action for our switch. So I'm going to take the Democrat switch, and I'm going to drag it to below our viewDidLoad function. And I'm going to name this switch changed. And the event is a value change. I'm going to change the type, though, to UI switch. So anytime we change the value, it's going to trigger the code we're going to write for this. So I'm going to say connect. Now what I want to do is I want to have the action apply to the other switches as well. So we can just drag from that little circle in front of the function for switch changed to our 4 other switches. And so our action now is going to handle all 5 of those switches being modified. And what we're going to do is create a method called showMatches. And I'm going to create a function called showMatches. Nothing being passed to it. And it's going to be a void method, nothing being returned. Just going to create the stub. We'll come back and work on that in a minute. I'm going to create another function here. This one's going to be populate. Let's call it Populate Congress. It also is going to take no parameters and is a void method. void needs to be a capital V. So the Populate Congress method is going to read all of our data in that we're going to copy from that Excel spreadsheet. In order to read that data in, I need an array to hold that information. And all that information is going to be instances of our Congress class. So I need to create a variable. I'm going to call it members. And members is going to be an array of type Congress. And so I'll call the constructor for that array and telling it type Congress. Now to populate Congress, we're going to do that once our view loads. So on the view did load, let's add a call to populate Congress. So we need to add the code now to populate Congress to create all those instances. So we're going to jump over to Excel. And I simply went into one of the columns, and into column J in this case, and I created a formula of some concatenation. Now this becomes a little bit tricky. You got to kind of play around with this a little bit. Concatenation in the VB script or in the formulas of Excel is the ampersand. So we use the plus here in Swift. They use an ampersand. So what this formula says, I'm going to concatenate a literal string of members dot append parenthesis Congress parenthesis lower h colon, and that's my literal string. Then I'm concatenating to that with the ampersand CHR34. That's a quote. And whatever value is being concatenated in A2. In this case, it's going to be the R. Okay, I'm skipping my header row here. And I then need another quote. And then I'm going to do a literal string of comma, space, ST colon. Another quote. And this time, I've got a little formula here. I want to take left of F2. That's going to be our state district. I only want the two most left characters. I don't want the number. So I just want LA, not LA05. So that's what the left does. Little method there in VB script or in Excel formulas. Concatenate there the quote, and then a little string of comma, space, P colon. Another quote, the value of H2, that's going to be my party, RDI, question mark, whatever. Closing quote for that. Literal string of a space, LN colon, quote, the last name, which is in D2, quote, literal string of comma, space, FN colon, quote, B2, that's the first name, ending in a quote, and then my final thing is a concatenation of a little string of two parentheses. And the result of all that is, whoops, didn't mean to change anything there. Let me zoom in here so you can see this. So the result of all that is I get this members.append Congress. That's going to call our initializer. And then we're passing the values of R for H, LA for ST, R for P, last name Abraham, first name Ralph. Now, you have two choices here. I'm going to give you a choice. You could type that code for every one of these 541 items into Swift. Or, what's behind door number 2? Select cell J2 in this little drop-down box. We're going to fill down till we get to the bottom of our data, right there. And that's going to copy that formula for all of those rows, and we get the items that we want for each of our data instances. And again, I'm going to shrink this down a little bit so you can see all that together. It takes a little bit of time to set up this formula here and make sure you get it right. But once you do that, it's a huge time savings. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to select that top cell, cell J2. Just going to drag down. And get that very last item. I'll do a Command C to copy. We'll go back to Xcode. And in the Populate Congress, and place my cursor there and do the magic of Command V. And there is all of our statements to create the data. And one thing you should see is all of the strings are in red, so it's kind of easy to look at it, make sure everything got correct. We've got our references to HST, P, LN, and FN. If we had done one of those wrong, let's say instead of a P here, I'd actually put in maybe a Q. We should get an error here. There we go. So it should recognize if this is correct or not and give us a warning if it's not. Like, what's the error we get here? Incorrect argument label in call. Expected HSTPLNFN, replace Q with P. Pretty good error message. So I'm gonna say fix. And we're back to where we should be. Now what we need to do is show the results in our show matches. So all we're gonna do at this point is just simply have it show all of the data items. All of this data went into our array called members. So to make sure we're getting the data showing in our results, we're simply going to create a for loop, and it's going to call it XYZ in members. And we're going to take XYZ. Now, XYZ here is going to be each instance of our members array. And if I do a period here, notice I can access all the different variables of our class, but I can also reference the methods with the little M's here. There's our get full name method. There's our show listing method. I went show listing. Now I could have written this here to simply, I misspelled, typed in an A rather than S. That's okay. Actually, let's go back. Let's change that. Make sure this is correct. So we're going to change show listing. We're getting an error here because it doesn't exist at this point. And I'm going to come back to Congress and change that A to an S. Go back to our view controller. That should go away. I've got an extra S down here. Okay, so I'm getting error on Populate Congress. So I think I'm missing somewhere in here I had a bracket out of alignment. Oh, I'm missing a bracket here, that's why. So I'm gonna put that in, take this one out. So that's where that error is coming from. There actually is nothing wrong with our Populate Congress. So we want to tell it where to put this show listing. So actually, before we do our for, let's do a TV results dot text. So I always want to remove anything that's currently there, so it's not appending. So it's just going to equal quote, quote. And then we'll do a TV results dot text plus equals. XYZ, comma, show listing. And of course, you can use anything here for XYZ. It's just a common variable that I use. So once we load our app into our simulator, it's going to call Populate Congress. It's going to add all this data into our members, and nothing's going to happen because we need to call show matches. So once that data is done loading, then we call show matches. And for now, all it's going to do is show all the data. And then we're going to change that to query our data based on the user's responses to our controls. So I'm going to set up my simulator for, in my case, the iPhone or the iPad Pro 10.5, and I'm going to launch. I'm going to cross my fingers. Oh, we forgot one thing. What happened? What went wrong there? What did we forget to add?
You need your
New lines.
We need a new line character. Absolutely. So in C#, I'd probably do that in a list box, and we wouldn't have to worry about the new line characters. But we did forget to add that in here. So let me go back to my program. So we need to concatenate, or I'm going to do a little interpolation here. So let's just do XYZ show listing as an interpolation, and then a new line character. I think that's a little faster than actual concatenation. Might save us 1 millisecond. And I'm going to run again. That looks much better. Now I'm also seeing here showing 0 matches. So we're going to have that reflect how many matches we have in our query. But I can take and I can scroll through all this information. And my data was already alphabetically sorted by last names. That's how it comes in. We could write a routine that would go through the array and sort it by last name, or sort it by state, or sort it by party. I'm not going to do that today. We're just want to work with some data here. And if we have time, we'll go back and do some sorting. Everybody get it to work? Anybody not get it to work, I should say. Any errors coming up? If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the iOS app development cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.